Hi everyone, Jason here. Jono can't make it this week, so Tovia and I are doing Torah Pearls on our own. Right, this week we're looking at Eikev, Deuteronomy 7:12 through 11:25, and we're starting in chapter 7, verse 12. And my first question, the first line says, "And it will be because you have heeded these ordinances and keep them and perform that the Lord your God will keep for you the covenant and the kindness that he swore to your forefathers." But I've learned that the word there at the beginning, heed, is actually heal. Is that right?
Well, I know. So the word there is a word that you actually know very well. V'hoya Eikev, and it'll be if. And Eikev really means heal. So this is an allusion to Jacob, meaning it's speaking to the children of Israel. And the word there is a word you know, and that's tishmu'un, from the word shama. In fact, you have the word shema right in there. And what is important to understand about the biblical Hebrew of Shema here is it really doesn't mean here, although people translate it that way, Hear, O Israel. But actually, in English language, there are two different words that could be used to translate this word, and it's often mistranslated. In Yiddish, there's two words, Zaherin, which means to hear, and Deherin, which means to listen. So therefore, when it says Shema Yisrael, it doesn't mean just simply use your ears and pick up the auditory vibrations and you hear it, but rather what is in view in all these passages. And the word Shema is going to be used over and over again through this. And incidentally, it is also the opening passage of Isaiah 53 that what will happen is, who would have believed our report? Believe it or not, the word report isn't there. The word is, who would have believed this understanding? It's an amazing, delicious word. So therefore, V'hoya Eikev Tishmun es hamishpatim. Here it means all commandments, all these commandments. Shemartem, and that comes to the word shemira, which means you will guard them. And you notice there's a difference. The first of all, guard them means watch out, guard over them. That's why we have Gedorim, we have fences that protect the commandments itself. V'asisem oisam, and you will perform them. Then V'shamar Hashem Elokecha L'cha es habris, then the Almighty will in turn guard the covenant of kindness asher nishba la'avoseichem. This so the word there really isn't. These words are words that really we're familiar with. All the roots here are very, very, very straightforward. And as I tell people, when of course we go to the English, you're in La La Land. You might as well you might as well go to Disneyland. And I always say this, man. I say to everyone, learn the Hebrew. And Hebrew is, in a sense, a very difficult language for the English speaker because there's no relationship between English, which is from the Latin Romance languages. It's an Indo-European language and a Semitic language. So in one sense, Indonesians can learn Hebrew easier because there's a Semitic structure in Indonesian that English lacks, but Hebrew has a very big advantage. It's a very small language. It's a tiny lexicon. There are very few, it's not a large language. And therefore, once people learn Hebrew, they realize, oh my gosh, I know all these words. Like just now, I said tishmu'un. So you go, tishmu'un, what's that? And then the root, if we remove the prefix and the suffix, we're left with three letters right in smack in the middle, Nezirut. Shama. But not here. It really means to listen. Now, this opening passage may present a little bit of a conundrum, and I want to just present it. Do you see any problem in this passage of God is saying, if you'll keep the commandments, then I will guard the covenant? It might raise a question, and that it seems that up until this point in the Bible, that the covenant that God made with our forefathers, which is expressed at the end of this verse, opening verse, is unconditional. And suddenly it appears superficially there's actually a condition on the bris, on the covenant. But we know very well that the condition that the covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, is completely unconditional. Unless there's any person listening to this broadcast going, well, how do you know that? If you look at the end of a chapter we've already gone through, and that's Leviticus chapter 26, the blessings and the curse, that's how the whole chapter ends, that no matter how badly you behave, I will never utterly destroy you, lest I break my covenant that I made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And therefore, presenting this, what seems to be a conundrum, we can now understand what's really happening throughout this entire chapter and understand what is arguably the most important covenant in Scripture, although there are others that God will not break.
So in this passage, or in this Torah portion, it's the second of two parts where Moses is addressing the people in his last big Sermon on the Mount, if you like, and we're starting off really with an if clause, right? It's if you do this, then you'll do this, and then we're gonna rush into Moses explaining to all the people where they've erred before, and uses those examples as ways to tell the people not to do that again. So we've had the if clause, and this is the promise. And he will love you and bless you and multiply you. He will bless you with the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your soil, your grain, your wine, and your oil, the offspring of your cattle and the choice of your flocks in the land which he swore to your fathers to give you. And said, it's a land that Moses won't get to live in, but he still continues to the people. You shall be blessed above all peoples. There shall be no sterile male or barren female among you, or your livestock. How do we address there were some barren females later in the text?
Oh, because the Torah addresses that very directly, and the Torah tells us that this is if you are faithful to the mitzvos, to the commandments, then you're going to have these blessings. That's the one half of the condition. The other half of the condition is that if you don't, then not only are you going to have a problem of barrenness and sterility, but actually you're going to be thrown out of the land and horrible things are going to happen to you. One other comment that should be is that most people understand this as you are blessed mikol ha'amim, that you will be blessed. Your translation has it, you'll be blessed above all the nations. Is that how you translate it? Above all peoples. So actually that's not the word. The word above there doesn't exist. Again, this is a mistranslation. Baruch tihiyeh, you shall be blessed mikol ha'amim. That means you shall be blessed from all the nations, or all the nations will receive their blessings from you. And if you look at, for instance, Psalm 67, we see King David almost commenting on this, where he actually expresses this explicitly. And I encourage you to go to Psalm 67, just the end of the chapter, where King David writes, "Let the peoples of the earth all praise you, Hashem. Let all of them praise you. The earth has yielded its produce. Our God blesses us. God blesses us, so that all the ends of the earth may fear him." So what is happening here is that the nations of the world are receiving our receiving their blessings, the Baruch Tiyeh Mikol Ha'am, that all the nations receive their blessings from us, which of course harkens back to the original promise that God made to Abraham. So it's not like, and it's unfortunate, people think that like the Jews are first class and the Gentiles are second class citizens. And then Paul, of course, he will exploit this, particularly in Galatians 3, and saying, look, if you're a Christian, then we're all one in the body, and so on and so forth. But that's not at all what's happening here. All the nations receive their blessing, and Mikol Ha'amin, from all the nations. That's the language that's over here. There's one other point that that will alleviate a lot of confusion here. Although corporate Israel is indestructible, the nation is an eternal nation and it cannot be destroyed. And if the sun is giving forth its light and the moon its light by night, then you know Israel's here, Jeremiah 31. But no individual Jew has this guarantee. As you notice, this portion begins with the word and, v'hoya, which means it is, as you mentioned at the beginning, at the outset, this is really very much a continuation of the previous portion. And I need to juxtapose two passages from the same chapter, because this is actually, chapter begins with verse 12, which means there are verses that preceded in the same chapter. And I just want to look at one verse, chapter 7, verse 9, where we see this explicitly, that not all Jews have a guarantee that they will be part of the covenant nation and enjoy the promises. And if you go to verse 9, I don't know how your translation, how the translation in the Bible you're looking at uses, but if you go to chapter 7, verse 9, that you know that God is the true God, you should know it, and he's Shomer HaBris, the same words, he's the guardian of the bris and the kindness only L'oihavav, to those who love him, ushmarei mitzvaysev l'elav dor. God only maintains the covenant only with those Jews who do two things. Number one, have a personal relationship with him, and number two is they carry on the truth of God's message. That's really, if you want to understand this portion, Eikev, what is coming into view is that really it's conditional. My friends, you have met many people who are not observant Jews, but their great-grandparents are. If you'll ask the question, what happened to the Jews who converted to Christianity in the 1st century, or in the 5th century, or in the 10th century? Where are the descendants? The answer is, they're lost among the nations of the world. They're not here. What happened to the Jews who became Sadducees? Where are their grandchildren? They're not among us today. And therefore, what we have today is only those, the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of those who are completely observant. Jason, I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you've ever spoken to a person who's Jewish but not observant, and you ask them, are you Jewish? Not only am I Jewish, my great-grandfather was the chief rabbi of some city. You ever hear that? Oh, yeah, my great-grandfather was the chief rabbi. Because somehow, if it wasn't the chief rabbi of a city, then the great-grandchildren would have never have made it. So the covenant is conditional. The only Jews that are here today identifying as Jews are those who are the descendants of those who did two things. Number one, have a personal relationship with God, and number two is were faithful to Hashem's commandments. There are many Jews who joined all sorts of religions, abandoned tenets of the Jewish faith. Their grandchildren are not here with us. It doesn't mean you won't encounter Jews who are Christians today. identifying as Messianic. But if you ask them, who was your great-great-grandfather? Well, they weren't Messianic. They weren't Christians, that's for sure. Because if they were, their descendants would all be gone. So therefore, this is the critical point of this whole parsha, is that God is saying the following. National Israel, that covenant cannot be broken. And we've seen this in the past. However, no individual Jew has that guarantee. And you know, what we're doing with Jono, with you and I, what we're doing is we're not trying to keep the Jewish people from disappearing, because that actually can't happen. The message we have to every Jew is, don't give up your seat on the bus. The bus will go on with or without you, but don't give up your seat on the bus. National Israel cannot be destroyed. There will always be a remnant that's faithful. Elijah made the error of thinking, in fact, and for good reason, he thought it was over, that all the Jews were worshiping Baal, and God was angry with him. And God rebuked him and said, no, there are 7,000 Jews who are faithful, didn't kiss the hand of Baal. And that's what's happening here in Eikev. There's a distinction between corporate Jewry, and this is something I'm just going to spend just the only moment, then we'll move right through it. And this is a point that I think every Jew who is in the church, or every Jew who really is going, I don't know which is the truth, which way should I go? Keep your eyes on Israel. If the Jews, I'm going to just take Christianity. If Jesus was the Messiah and the teachings of the church were true, why didn't God preserve all the Jews who became believers in Jesus? Where are the grandchildren of Peter? Where are the grandchildren of all the disciples? They're all gone. Where are they? They disappeared. If the claims of the church were true, then God would have never preserved those who rejected his son and rejected the most important thing. I would posit in my lecture, The Law of Moses and the New Covenant, and I'm not promoting anything because it's free online, I make this point, that every person, you see it with your own eyes. If, in fact, the claims of the church were true, why is there not one person today identifying as a Jew who believes in Jesus, who can trace himself back to the first Jews who believe in Jesus? The answer is they lost the covenant. They're not here. And the question is, if Christianity's teachings are true, why didn't God preserve those Jews? I've heard a Christian apologist say, you know why all the Jews who believe in Jesus, or Yeshua, whatever they call him, aren't here anymore? Is because the Jews who didn't believe in Jesus persecuted them. You wouldn't believe. I'm not going to name which missionaries, but the most famous missionaries, this is the stock argument. The stock argument is that the Jews who didn't believe in Jesus, threw the Jews who did believe in Jesus, threw them out of the synagogue, and they were persecuted by the Jewish community of so-called unbelievers, and that's why they became lost among the nations. That's such a foolish argument. The argument is the opposite. The whole point of the covenant, as we're going to read it here, and once you understand this, you understand it all. The whole purpose of the covenant is that no matter how much you're persecuted, no matter how great your enemies are, no matter how impossible it may seem for you to overcome the vicissitudes and overcome the adversaries, Hashem will preserve you despite that miraculously. So therefore, the whole argument is without merit, because the argument is predicated that, they were persecuted, that's why they didn't survive. No, Hashem is saying, even no matter what will happen to you, I will always leave over a remnant. So if every person listening to this who's struggling with faith, you have to ask yourself a question. Look around you. Who did God preserve? As the Jewish people today, who are they? They're all the Jews who are descendants of those who rejected the claims of the church, not embraced them, rejected the teachings of the Sadducees, not embraced them. Their grandchildren are alive today. It's not like they all became sterile, but they held lost among the nations. They're now, they count themselves as Presbyterians and God only knows what. And that's the key point of everything. It's corporate Israel is unconditional. However, the individual Jew doesn't have that guarantee. And therefore, my holy brothers and sisters, with your own eyes, you can witness that God kept a double promise, not only preserving the Jews, but only preserving those Jews who accepted Torah, who rejected the tenets of Christianity. That's who the Jewish people are today. Most Jews opted out, and I'll say that. Most Jews opted out of the message, and they're no longer here as Jews. And I'll make one last, with your permission, just one last comment, because and then we'll go on. I apologize, because this is so fundamental to everything. This is the message that God made with Abraham. In Genesis 18, God says this in verse 8, in chapter 18, verse 18 and 19, that God said to Abraham that you will become a great and mighty nation, and in you all the earth will receive their blessing. And here we see it here again. These are parallel passages. Now look at verse 19 of Genesis 18. It says, "For I have chosen him." For what purpose? "In order that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of Hashem and doing that which is righteous and just, in order that Hashem may bring upon Abraham what is spoken about him." So therefore we see the covenant is conditional on that for the purpose. Why are the Jews an eternal nation? Just because we're supposed to be around a long time? No. The Jewish people have an eternal message to the world. We are to be a light to the nations. So those Jews who say, look, I don't want to be a part of that message. I don't want to convey that message to the world. So that means they're opting out of the mandate. If you're opting out of the message, that means there's no reason for you to be a part of a covenant nation. It's not like a person's being punished because now they're not Jewish, they became an Eskimo. That's not the punishment. The point is, then there's no need for you to be a Jew and to be in the land if you're not carrying on the message of Abraham. And that's the point I just wanted to make here.
Can I just ask very quickly,
Sure.
that if the Jews are a light to the nation, and if they have to opt in to giving the message, could you succinctly in one sentence tell us what that message is?
The message is that God, number one, is the creator of the universe. He is a God of history, and that God wants a personal relationship with you. These are not my words. If you look carefully at the text, both in the passage I quoted early in verse 9 and 12, it says it there. Number one, that you're to love Hashem, and number two is, not in that order, and to observe his commandments. That's the message, that there's one God, and that God is a God of history, not just a God who created the world and went to sleep. And
Lovely.
He's one. That's
Brilliant.
it.
From 15. "And the Lord will remove from you all illnesses and all of the evil diseases of Egypt, which you knew. He will not set upon you, but he will lay them upon your enemies." Does it actually say diseases, or is it referencing the plagues, or is it both?
No. It actually says kol choyle, which means all the sickness. V'chol madvei Mitzrayim, which means all the maladies and diseases of Egypt that are indigenous to Egypt, that God will remove it for you.
Yeah, I imagine Egypt being right on the Nile with all the heat and the mosquitoes and the water. Must have been rife with sickness.
You know, I have to mention this one point. You know, if you look today, I don't like to say we're definitely, and I'm not hearing voices, but I think every person of faith realizes that we're likely living we're observing the Messianic age possibly unfolding before us. I'm so cautious because I, of course, want it to be, but it's almost impossible for me But look at the European Union. They're threatening to boycott us, and they're threatening to boycott us in the areas of the world you live in Europe. And what do they want to boycott? They want to boycott Israel's fruits and vegetables and flowers. Do you know that never in history, they want to, all the food that comes out of Israel, they want to label it made in settlements, made in schmettlements, all this stuff. Do you know that in history this would have been inconceivable? Because the land of Israel was totally barren, and Israel wasn't the exporter and wasn't the breadbasket of the world. Eretz Yisrael was a place that had to import all of its food. And in fact, when the great writer, what's his name, visited the land of Israel in the 19th century, he said there's nothing that grew here. This was an unimaginable thing, that people would come to Israel to be healed. Israel has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people every year who visit Israel, not because they want to go to the Western Wall, but because they're coming there to get medical treatment. You have, it's an amazing thing. But actually, they're boycotting Israel's avocados. 200 years ago, no one could boycott an Israeli avocado because there were not that many Jews in the land, and these blessings didn't happen. Now they want to boycott us by labeling Israeli produce and flowers. All the blessings we're seeing here, we are observing in this parsha, are unfolding for our eyes. Why is it? Because today we're seeing more Torah in the land of Israel since, you'd have to go back to the days of Hezekiah. And also we've gone through Jacob's trouble, please God, Jeremiah 30 verse 7. Israel has been forgiven, Isaiah chapter 40 verse 2. Nachmu, nachmu, Ami, comfort me, my people. Why? For Israel, Jerusalem has taken from the Lord double for iniquity. So Israel's been forgiven. So now we're seeing the blessings unfolding. That our enemies are saying, no, we have to stop the tons and tons of fruits and vegetables that are coming from the land of Israel to feed Europe. This never happened in history until this day, what we're watching now in front of our eyes. And everybody knows that every word I'm saying is true. They're not boycotting the cell phones, by the way, which technology comes from Israel. Because cell phones, they're not throwing away their iPhones. The iPhones may be made in China or whatever, or the Samsungs are made in Korea, but the technology and the Intel chips are all developed in Israel, and no one's willing to part with their cell phones. Anyways.
Yeah, the cash points and the ATM and everything else they were using.
Go boycott your security systems on your computer that are all developed in Israel. No, they're all boycotting avocados.
I want to encourage people to look for things that are made in Israel and buy them when you go and get your groceries. Now, I heard a few months ago, there was a very interestingly edited video on YouTube about the boycott in Ireland, where this guy went around to 3 small stores and seemed to be speaking to the wider proportion of Irish businesses who are boycotting. But that's not the case. The largest retailer of food here in Ireland is Tesco's, a UK company. And regularly, my potatoes are from Israel, my carrots are from Israel, my avocados are from Israel.
Ireland, I mean, if you would tell people, and those who understand history, that Ireland should need an Israeli potato.
Right, I know.
I don't know how far Ireland is exactly from Israel, but it's thousands of miles away. Thousands of miles. It's not 150 miles away. It's not like going from London to Manchester, which is maybe a 4-hour drive. We're talking about thousands of miles that Ireland needs an Israeli avocado, an Israeli tomato, and a potato.
But it's seasonal, right? So Ireland only has potatoes a certain time of the year, and then we eat them. But for the rest of the year, we rely on other things. And at the moment, we're relying on Israel, and they are awesome potatoes. So, anyway, we'll move on. But if you're in the shops and you see a label that says Israel,
but my holy brothers and sisters, everything you're seeing, we're reading, you're not looking at a document that's 3,300 years old. You're looking at the living words of Hashem, and we're watching this before our eyes. This is the time to raise your lips to Hashem and praise Him and say, look at this. Look how your Torah is true and your promise is true. The good and the bad. I'm not saying it's all good. We're going to come now to a point where God's going to say that if you don't, and there'll be the very famous middle paragraph of the Shema that's going to come up. Anyways, let's move through soon now. but just to see this is all happening for us. They're boycotting avocados from Israel. They're boycotting our avocados. But the cell phone, no, not so much. The computers, the Intel chips, that they don't want to boycott. They're not that religious. And the medical technology that people could swallow a pill and can film their whole intestines. No one's willing to boycott Israeli medications from Teva, which is the largest generic manufacturer of medicine in the world. Anyways, let's continue over here.
And you shall consume all the peoples which your Lord gives you, and you shall not spare them, and you shall not worship their gods, for that will be a snare for you. Will you say to yourself, these nations are more numerous than I? How will I drive them out? You shall not fear them. You shall surely remember that the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all Egypt the great trials that your eyes saw, the signs, the wonders, the mighty hand, and the outstretched arm with which the Lord your God brought you out. So will the Lord your God do to all the peoples you fear. That's great, isn't it?
And it's great, and historically, you can only for 30 seconds imagine after the Holocaust, Jews who survived somehow came to the land of Israel, and only 2.5 years later, out of Buchenwald, they now have a Czechoslovakian rifle. The guy next to him has a Russian rifle. They don't even share ammunition, and they're fighting off 15 Arab enemies from all sides. In Jerusalem alone, they were fighting off 600 Jews were fighting off 31,000 Arab enemies. So you see these miracles. This is all before our eyes. The only problem we have is most of our listeners were born long after these events, and we take it for granted. You must be a student of history to know how all these miracles are unfolding before our eyes. Don't take anything for granted.
And 20. And also I've got Zira'ah, the flying insects.
Yes.
Okay, the Lord your God will incite against them until the survivors and those who hide from you perish. You shall not be terrified of them. For the Lord your God, who is in your midst, is a great and awesome God. The Lord your God.
Don't be afraid of them. And I apologize. There's a message here, and it's just to today. Stop when people say, "Oh, I'll have a two-state solution." Stop with the answer, "Oh, but it's a security danger because then a Palestinian state will be of 1 mile will be 1.5 kilometers from Ben Gurion Airport." That's not the reason. It was given to the people of Israel, and the land of Israel is not yours to give away. That's the key. And don't worry. That means not to worry about security, but know that if we're faithful to the God of Israel, God will destroy our enemies. Who would believe it, Jason, that every day we watch news and what do we see? Hezbollah is at war with Al-Qaeda, and Hamas can't get any money from Iran, and Iran is fighting Al-Qaeda. And all our enemies are killing each other. It's really, if I would tell someone 10 years ago, Al-Qaeda is going to be fighting Hezbollah, they'll go, "What are you, sick in the head?" We're watching every day. It's like you're watching miracles unfolding for us, which is unimaginable.
And the Lord your God will drive out these nations from before you little by little. You will not be able to destroy them quickly, lest the beasts of the field outnumber you.
But this verse just does require just one commentary, and that is that people go, "What does that mean? Like, why didn't you just get rid of them all in 1 second?" If the people of Israel would come into the land, and let's say everybody would just drop dead, and all the nations would instantly be gone, would disappear. But what happened then is it would create a very serious problem, and that is the beasts of the field. What keeps animals, dangerous animals, predators, out of cities? The presence of people that are able to shoo them away. But if, let's say, the whole land would suddenly be absent of all every human being would be gone, meaning i.e. your enemies, then what would happen is there'll be lions and all kinds of lions are indigenous to the land of Israel. Just so you know that. Just happens to be now. It just it's hard for them to make a living in Israel, but they're completely indigenous to the land of Israel. In fact, this was the problem the Samaritans had. They were getting eaten by lions, which caused their conversion to be rejected because they converted for the wrong reason. But the key is if all the nation would suddenly disappear and the people of Israel are just coming into the land, then the whole country will be filled with all these very dangerous predators. So therefore it's happened slowly that each city one by one is being destroyed in front of you rather than all of a sudden everybody, so that the whole country won't be overrun by these predators.
And from 23, but the Lord your God will deliver them to you, and he will confound them with great confusion until they're destroyed. Just what you were talking about with Hezbollah.
They don't even know. In Syria, if I ask you who's fighting, they don't even know who's fighting. I just saw on the news yesterday, America's trying to figure who's the bigger enemy. Is it Assad? No one can even track who's fighting who in Syria. Today, watching Mamish, watching verses in the Torah. As I watch, I'm saying, this is the verse. It's unfolded. They're so confused that all of our enemies are killing each other. Instead of going, stop, let's go fight Israel. Israel is, Ehud Barak, which I don't really agree with him 100% on anything, but he did coin a phrase that's saying that Israel is a villa in the midst of a jungle, which it is. Israel is people, everything is flourishing, and if you go to Syria, even if you're there as an aid worker to help Muslims, ISIS will chop your head off, as we've seen all over. And in Jordan, now Jordan is facing ISIS. They're all facing in Syria, forget about it, it's a garbage can. Egypt fell apart completely, but Israel's a place of peace. In the middle of absolute chaos.
And he will deliver their kings into your hand, and you will destroy their name from beneath the heavens. No man will be able to stand up before you until you have destroyed them. The graven images of their gods will burn with fire. You shall not covet them.
That's what it says, will burn with fire?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's very important. That's not a correct translation, and it's really a bad translation because it's misleading. This is a commandment. Pesile Elohehem, which means the graven images of their gods. Tis rifun ba'esh. It's a command. You must burn it with fire. Okay, that's very important. Loisach moy kesev v'zahav. You shall not desire, want, crave the gold and silver that these images are made of, and you should not take it for yourself, because this is an abomination for God. Now you ask yourself, what application does this have to our listeners? And I'll tell you what it is. And I'm sure, Jason, you've heard this before. People say to me who've left the church and have come to the God of Israel, they say, I got a big, very valuable, expensive library of New Testaments, of Christian commentaries, of Christian this and Christian that. Can I put it on eBay? Can I put it up on a Craigslist and sell it? And I say, God forbid, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to put a stumbling block for the blind. So those of you who have Christian books and Christian and all kinds of statues or crucifix or whatever it is an issa d'oraisa, and this applies to non-Jews as well, because this is a subset of the Noachide laws. It is forbidden to have any financial benefit. That's what the end of the verse is saying. You're not allowed to sell your Christian Bible. You're not allowed to sell, your Calvin's commentary that you spend $500 on. It's forbidden. If you want to use it in order to help others get out of the church, so of course I have an immense library of Christian literature, but I use it to serve Hashem. But it is forbidden to sell your Christian Bible. It is forbidden to sell your crucifix to a non-Jew. You're violating this commandment, and you're placing a stumbling block before the blind. This has a very specific application, and I'm asked this question every week. Can I put up my New Testament on eBay? Forbidden to have any pleasure from it. It has to be completely removed.
And it's also like helping people build an altar to a foreign god. Even without the money, you're increasing the possibility someone will increase their faith in the foreign gods, and that would be enough for me to not want to do that. But that's just my 2 cents.
And the next verse also is very, very important. The next, I know I'm doing the reading, but it's very yummy. Loisavi sayeva el beisechi. You're not allowed to have these things in your house. Be very careful, those of you who are antique collectors will go to the East and buy statues. It's forbidden to have these things in your house. I have a very dear friend of mine who bought a home, very, very expensive. And I was looking at the shelf because what happened was he bought the home and in the contract was all the furnishings and everything. That means he bought the home and the deal was the guy just hands over the keys and whatever in the house is in the house. And I looked at the shelf and I saw that the guy had antique Canaanite gods. I mean, probably worth a fortune in terms of the antiquities market. I said, you can't have it in your house, you can't sell, and you have to destroy it. You can't, it's forbidden to have such a thing in your house. And then the end of this verse, and then we'll try to move quickly because I know we're moving fast there. But every one of these, you have another mitzvah of the Torah, and that's the end of verse 26. It's not enough not to have it, not to have any benefit, not to have any pleasure, not to give it to anyone. It's one of the 613 mitzvahs, which is a binding on a non-Jew, a ben Noach, as well as a Jew, because this is a subset of idolatry. Shakates to shaktsenu, which means the Torah is saying, and it's a double language, you shall surely be loathe it, despise idolatry, v'sayev tesavenu, and you could be totally disgusted by it. Kichermu, if you pass by, I just say this, if you see a Christmas tree and you say, don't, God forbid, say, oh, what a nice church. Look at these flying buttresses in Dublin, or these big, beautiful big churches in France that were built in the. No, it has to disgust you. And I say this to you as my brothers and sisters. If it doesn't disgust you, if seeing these statues and idols doesn't bother you, you have to go to a spiritual doctor. You say, oh, Hashem, I need help. Just like if you would stick your hand in the fire and it doesn't bother you, that means there's something wrong with you. And there are people who have such a malady where they don't feel pain and they don't feel, that means there's something wrong. It actually is a disease. If these idols don't bother you, it means you say, oh, Hashem, please help me out, because it is forbidden in the Torah to actually, it's a forbidden in the Torah to glorify, to say, look, we don't believe in it, but that's one heck of a statue of Jesus. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to go to Brazil and admire that statue that's 5,000 feet tall on the top of a mountain in I think in Rio de Janeiro. It's absolutely forbidden. You have to, it has to disgust you because it's a complete abomination.
I have to ask, because I'm sure people are thinking, we see ISIS going into these sites and destroying these statues and archaeological artifacts. How do we...
I'm going to tell you how we process it. How do we process that ISIS happens to provide, and Hezbollah, they provide fantastic health care for the people who belong to them, that they have maternity wards, and the Third Reich also had tremendous programs of health care for those who are members of the Third Reich. The answer is that we don't despise ISIS for taking a statue of foreign gods and destroying it. That's not the issue. Of course, the Hezbollah is very popular in Lebanon because of the medical care that they provide free of charge for people who are poor. And so did the Third Reich do that in 1933. And that's why people loved Hitler. Hitler ran for office in 4 years earlier and only had 2%. But after the economic disaster, that's what launched him, because he was giving health care and everything. So the key is, it's not that there are things that the nations of the world borrowed from us. they plagiarized our ideas. That's fine that they're taking a statue. If there's a Canaanite statue and ISIS destroys it, but that doesn't make ISIS good because that they happen to have, because the Third Reich happens to have a maternity ward that has free for people who can't afford to have babies. That doesn't mean that the Nazi movement is great. It just happens to be that they took that idea from us, and therefore it's a part of Islam. That's all. But the fact that they're chopping people's heads off and all the evil and violence that they're doing is a disgusting abomination. So that's what's very clear. But that's not the part of ISIS that disturbs us. The part of ISIS that disturbs us is the fact that they're murdering and killing and so on.
What I was mentioning was, so they go to destroy this big statue of Nimrod, and there's a public outcry that that's a historical monument and that we should keep it. And I've heard that come from Jewish sources as well as non-Jewish sources. But shouldn't we just let them destroy these things?
Right, that person, that's not a person who fears God. Is, first of all, it's so. They're sitting chopping people's heads off. So, it's all that becomes. But no, that's not the issue. The problem that we have at ISIS, that there are statues of false gods that people worship and they destroy it. Islam teaches them to do it because Islam took that from Judaism. They borrowed that from the Jewish faith. And ISIS, although they are a machination of Islam, I'm just going to say that, very obviously, because even. Let's just say the average Muslim, I assume, despises ISIS, at least for embarrassing Islam, but that's all borrowed from Judaism. They did borrow some things. ISIS also believes in one God and no other. They are Islam. So, that's not the problem with ISIS. The problem with ISIS is that they're murderers and so on, and many other things, not the fact that they destroy the gods, the ancient gods. The Torah is very clear that this is supposed to happen. The Torah says you're supposed to give charity. Hezbollah gives a lot of charity. If you don't know this, Hezbollah has extensive agencies, and that's what makes them such a big hit in Lebanon, providing for needy people in Lebanon. Doesn't mean Hezbollah, who wants to wipe out every Jew off the face of the earth. The Third Reich had the same exact program for 12 years, from 33 to 45. They had extensive programs for medical health for those who were indigenous, who were destitute.
All right, so we're going to move on. We are at the beginning of chapter 8, and again, Moses is addressing Israel during this whole parasha. Every command that I command you this day, you shall do it, and that you may live and multiply and come and possess the land that the Lord swore to your forefathers. You shall remember the entire way on which the Lord your God led you these 40 years in the desert, in order to afflict you, to test you, to know what is in your heart, and whether you would keep his commandments or not. Mm-hmm. And he afflicted you and let you go hungry, and then fed you with manna, which you did not know, and nor did your forefathers know, so that he would make you know that man does not live by bread alone. That's where it finishes, right? Man does not live by bread alone. But rather by whatever comes forth. But rather by, not as well as, but rather by whatever comes forth from the mouth of God does man live. Fabulous.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
I know what everybody's thinking, but we're not going to go there.
No, we're not. That's been covered plenty of times already.
Plenty of time. Okay.
Your clothing did not wear upon you, nor did your foot swell these 40 years. And so that's saying that their clothes were miraculously restored.
Yeah, no, not restored. They just never wore out. Mm-hmm. The clothing never. Remember, I did all these things, and again, those of you who question, is this book a divine book? Is it a God-given book? Can I base my whole life? Can I trust this book? You have to ask it. And there are many people, and this is a malady in Europe much more than America, and that is that atheism is rampant all over Western Europe. This is not. I don't know what's going on in Ireland, but I can tell you in the UK, forget about it. But a person has to ask the question, who read this for the first time? That means this was written to people, and it's telling you, listen, you saw food come out of heaven that your forefathers didn't know. That's what the name Mun means. Like, what is this? Your clothing didn't wear out. Your feet didn't for 40 years. V'yodata in levavecha. You should know it with your. Now, the word levavecha usually means with your heart. The word lev real means with your mind. It does not mean the pump that's in your chest that pumps oxygenated blood in through your body. Your pump doesn't know anything. You should know it with your mind. That's how lev should be understood. Now the colloquial in the English language, that the word heart it can refer to as a person's mind, but that's what lev really is, with your mind.
I think
know it with your mind, not with the pump in your chest.
That's actually an underlying issue, I think, with the way that lots of people who are coming from Christianity and read this text, they read it with this idea, this mushy idea of the heart being your gut and your feeling and your emotion, when we read heart in the text, it's really talking about your knowledge and your sense and your wisdom,
the word
your
is
experience.
Know it. Ata haresa, going back to the previous chapter, Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 32, verse 30. Ata haresa ladas, you have been shown this so that you may know. Das means know. And here we see it's all the same language. V'yodata, you have to know this, not have faith. And how do you have to know this? With your mind, you have to know it completely. Ki asher, that what God has done. Ki yaseh ishes b'nai Hashem. And therefore you may wonder, well, why are bad, tough things happening to me? This is a very delicious verse here. And this also harkens back to the way Hashem carried you like a father carries a son. So here we have the same passage over here. Know in your heart that the reason why you undergo great difficulties and great challenges, and see this, and see what you did wrong in Gaza, that you should know in your heart, just as a father chastises a son, that's out of love. That's why Hashem chastises you, to bring you better, to make you a better person, to realize, whoa. The guy who owns Korean Airlines, he said, I raised my daughter bad. The guy's a billionaire. He owns Korean Airlines, and his daughter made a whole hullabaloo in JFK airport because they served macadamia nuts at the first class in a bag instead of on a plate, and she had the head stewardess thrown off the plane. And the father said, the South Korean fellow, a Korean guy, the father said, who owns the whole airline, he fired her and he said, I raised my daughter badly.
Mm. Well, there's a part here that I quite like. So we've gone from your clothing did not wear out to you shall know in your heart that just as a man chastises his son, so does the Lord your God chastise you. And then it says after that, and you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God, to go in his ways and to fear him. So it's gone to almost the future tense. And when I read the word shall, I'm always reminded of Genesis 4:7. When God is speaking and he says that sin is waiting at the door, but you shall overcome it. That there's this, because we know that during the course of Israel's history, there are going to be plenty of instances where Israel doesn't look at God and know that they're being chastised, they think they're being punished, or they don't keep the commandments. But this says that you shall eventually overcome all these things and figure it out. It's great hope in those two lines.
As the Navi says, he chastises the one whom he loves. And sometimes he puts us through difficult times so that we can appreciate those things that are really valuable in life. How often as children do we not appreciate family? And we appreciate people that ultimately betray us. And then when we're a little bit older in life and we're adults, when we've been through the vicissitudes and trials and tribulations in life, we say, you know what? Family is pretty important. Now, when I was a teenager and I really didn't care about didn't take my family seriously. I realize that my family is really so valuable to me. But how do people come to that conclusion that when I was a teenager, I placed very little value on the gift of having a family? And now you ask any person who's older and has been through pain and difficulty, say, you know what? Family is family and blood's thicker than water. But that statement, how did that emerge? It happened through a lot of pain, a lot of difficulty, but that's how you become great.
For the Lord your God is bringing you to a good land, a land of brooks of water, fountains and depths that emerge in valleys and mountains, a land of wheat and barley, vines and figs and pomegranates, a land of oil producing olives and honey. That's a 7 species right there.
Right. The word davash, just so technically it doesn't, it can be translated as honey. It is honey, but it doesn't mean bee honey here. It really means date honey. When the dates fall, the dates are, I don't even know how much sugar it has in it. It probably has more sugar than honey does. I don't know exactly, but it means that the dates literally are swollen. They are in Israel, and just the what drips out of it is so full of sugar. If you ever have a sweet tooth, just throw a date in your mouth and you'll see what happens. You'll get a sugar high like you never had in your life. So anyways, we'll continue.
A land in which you will eat bread without scarcity, you will lack nothing in it. A land whose stones are iron, and of whose mountains you will hew copper. And you will eat and be sated, and you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land he has given you.
This is the source. This is the source of why we make an after blessing. The blessing we make on food before we eat is a rabbinic commandment. The scriptural commandment is to make the blessing after you eat. Why does the Torah say? Why didn't the Torah say you should, most people sit around the table and we thank you, Lord, for this food? It's fine, but the key commandment to bless God and to make a bracha is after you eat. Look what it says here, v'chalta, and then it throws in the extra word, v'savata, and you'll be satisfied. And after you're satisfied, then you'll bless the Lord your God. What is being conveyed here? How many people go through vicissitudes and then only when they're in trouble and only when they're hungry and only when they can't pay the mortgage and only when they don't have what to eat, then they start praying to God. Hashem is saying no, but then once they're all taken care of, praying to God, they stop praying to God. No, Hashem says, I want that you have to bless Hashem, which acknowledge Hashem when you're full. This is what people fail to do, is when people are full and happy and satiated, then all the praying and praying all of a sudden stops because, I'm full. And you're going to see this is a lead up to where we're going to go. Because in fact, it is when you become full and you have all these blessings, Hishamelcha, watch out. This is what's going to happen to you. And that's where we're heading right now. This is a critical juncture, a turning point in the passage.
Is it saying there are no atheists in foxholes?
Yeah, but what happens outside of a foxhole? Suddenly it happens. I very often have helped people who are in prison, who become very religious in prison. The minute they're out of prison, goodbye, Charlie, they're out. And how do you know I'm telling you what I'm saying is not some nice little Tovia speech? It's the exact same, the words that come next. He shomer lecha, verse 11. Be careful. What mean be careful? You're going to have all these good things, and then what are you going to do? Pentish kaches Hashem alikecha. You're going to forget the Lord your God. I don't need him anymore. I'm full. That's why we bless. The main blessing is after we eat. That we know we haven't forgot you. We love you, Hashem. We appreciate it. Let's continue.
Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments, his ordinances, and his statutes, which I command you this day. You know what that does to me? That puts a secure link between doing and knowing. So that, for me, says that it's very difficult to say that you know God if you're not keeping his commandments. And it's very difficult to say that you don't know God if you are keeping the commandments. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that this is saying to me that if you think you've got a relationship with God and you're not keeping his commandments, then there's something wrong there. Because it specifically says, beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments. All right, which I command you this day, lest you eat and be sated and build good houses and dwell within, and your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and gold increase, and all that you have increases, and your heart grows haughty, and you forget the Lord your God,
there you go,
who has brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage.
Right. And then it tells us, if you do this, we're going to have this repeated twice, by the way, this exact theme, that what happens is a cycle. This is actually describing a cycle, and we're going to have it again, so just quickly. That is, Hashem blesses us because because we are faithful. But once my belly is all big and full, and once I have all the money in the bank to pay my mortgage, God, what God? God of who? What God? I forgot all about him. That Hashem says that one literally could cause the other. It's a challenging thing when you receive the blessing to continue with the same faithfulness as when you were going through the vicissitudes, and this is what's going to happen to you.
So God reminds Israel of what he's done for them, and we skip through to 18. But you must remember the Lord your God, for it is he that gives you the strength and makes wealth in order to establish his covenant which he swore to your forefathers in this day. For it will be, if you forget the Lord your God and follow other gods and worship them and prostrate yourself before them, I bear witness against you that day you will surely perish. I just want to ask very quickly, because it's something that sometimes comes up. We often use the word worship. And prostrate yourself. That prostrate's just another word for worship, isn't it? It's like the physical act of worshipping.
Yes, and it means a complete submission. It means that you prostrate yourself, means you submit yourself to other gods. I'll tell you just a quick thing. Like, for instance, religious Jews don't get on their knees when they pray. They don't do that. When I was a kid, if my grandmother ever saw me even sitting on my knees, not praying, she'd say, "You're not allowed to sit on your knees," because that's how the Catholics pray. Mm. So, the Catholics even have a bench a kneeling bench.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. A Jew doesn't do such a thing. We don't prostrate the way the nations of the world do. We don't imitate the way. And then here we have again in verse 1 of chapter 9, Shema Yisrael. We have a very peculiar text here, but we'll move through this here quickly. Shema Yisrael, Ata Oiver Hayom es Hayarden, going over the Jordan River, Lavai, Lareshes, going Gedol Matzul Memecha. You're going to inherit the land of nations that are much greater than you. But the key is, do not be afraid. And incidentally, cross references to Deuteronomy chapter 20. Do not be afraid of them, for the Lord thy God is with you. Mm. So, and that's what we have here. And you should know it today, that God will destroy your enemies that are before you. And this just leads us to one maybe passage that people may find to be unique. Don't say in your heart, verse 4 and 5, that God, when God does drive out your enemies before you, do not say it's because I am so righteous or I am so wonderful and so on and so forth. That's not the case. That's not the case that this is a gift because of this, but it's rather because the nations that are being expelled, they are completely wicked. And this is the connection why I brought in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the beginning of this program. And that it is because of the promise that God made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that God has done this. But what does that mean? All right, we get that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were great and God made covenants with them and blessed them. But what does that have to do with them having children, the covenant continue? If this is how this all comes together like a symphony that you just go nuts, and that is that only if you continue in the ways of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, only then will you have the land. That's what the covenant is based on, as we saw in Genesis chapter 18, verse 18 and 19. That's why I prepared you beforehand, because if you don't understand the covenant and the nature of the covenant, you won't be able to understand this chapter at all.
So don't spend your time thinking about how righteous you are, but remember, do not forget how you angered the Lord your God in the desert. From that day that you went out of the land of Egypt until you came to this place, you have been rebelling against the Lord. And that's Moses starting his rebuke to the people.
Right.
So in chapter 9, we read Moses giving a synopsis, if you like, of all the areas where the people made mistakes, where they complained, where when they built the calf, where they complained about the manna. There's it's everything that Israel has done up to this point. Moses reminds the people of how that angered the Creator. And we're going to skip forward now in the interest of time to chapter 10. And at that time, the Lord said to me, hew for yourself 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and come up to me onto the mountain, and make for yourself a wooden ark.
Right. This is a temporary ark, incidentally, until they're going to make later on the grand ark that's going to be later on. But this is a temporary ark to house, which actually houses both the 10 commandments that Moses himself cut out of stone, and the broken commandments that God himself, you remember the earlier show, that God himself first initially cut out of stone.
You know what? I've never read it and looked at it properly before. I always assumed he went up and then cut the stones, but in verses 1 and 3, it says that he cut the stones and then went up the mountain. Is that what it says in the Hebrew?
Yeah, that means that. Yes, that means going back with Moses through. At first, God was the one who carved the first set of 10 commandments out of stone, but those Moses threw on the floor and shattered them when he saw the people rejoicing at the golden calf. And then God said, now you go and carve for yourself luchos avonim, which means the stone tablets, karishonim, which means use the model, the template of the other ones, make it the same way, and then bring it up to the mountain, and also bring with you an Aron HaEtz, a wooden ark, to place it inside. The Eikev al luchos esadvarim ha'ela, and then and he inscribed in tablets the first script. So Hashem wrote down on the tablets, but here Moses cut out. If you go back to the text originally that we're discussing, you'll see it there that God cut out the first set of stones. Moses was the one who hew out of stone a duplicate of what God had done.
So Moses again continues to recall the story so far. It's like I'm previously on Sinai, and tells them, reminds them of where they've come from. The children of Israel journeyed from the wells of Bnei Ya'akan, where Aaron, and to Mozerah, where Aaron died, and there was buried, and Eleazar took over as Cohen. And I'm just skimming through this. And I remained on the mountain like the first days, 40 days and 40 nights, and the Lord hearkened to me at that time. The Lord did not wish to destroy you. So that's Moses going up to atone for the people.
Right.
And then the Lord said to me, arise and go to lead the travels before the people, so that they may come into possess the land that I promised them, their forefathers. And now, O Israel, what does the Lord your God demand of you?
This is an unbelievable verse.
Yes, fabulous.
By the way, there's a very similar verse in Micah chapter 4, chapter 6, verse 7 and 8, and in Micah 4, it says, what does God want from you? What does he want from you? What a question. Like, every person asks, what does God want from you? So it should say here, God so loved the world. No. It says you should fear the Lord your God and love him and keep all his commandments. Lishmar Mos Hashem. If anyone comes along and says, no, God wants something else from you, say, look, if I have to choose, this is not like an anti-missionary show, but I just had this conversation on Facebook with one very sweet Christian in India, and I said to him, it's just we're not against anything. We're just saying if we have to choose between Moses and Paul, we're going with Moses every time. I mean, what more could you want? Like, how could you more graphically say this is what God wants from you? He wants a personal relationship with you and to observe the commandments. There are people, I'm not going to lie to you, who call themselves Orthodox, whatever it is, and they keep Sabbath, they keep law, but they don't treat people. They don't think about what they're doing with God. There are other people who say, I'm a good Jew in my heart, I'm a cardiac Jew. That also is not. Hashem wants both. Notice, too, having God in your heart and to perform them. There are some people who say, oh, God has not put the law in our heart. It's in our heart. It's in our heart, our kidneys, our cardiac. It's a heart. No, it's what God says. And therefore, what we do is, all the Jewish people are doing is we're following exactly what the Holy Torah says graphically. Not some ambiguous text that can't understand. A 3-year-old can understand these passages.
It occurred to me actually over the weekend, the whole Torah in my heart argument. I thought, well, that's fine, love your children in your heart, love your wife and your husband in your heart, and then send them out the house. You don't need the real thing anymore. Yeah. You love them in your heart.
Yeah, in my heart, I love you. I just threw you out of the house and you're living in a barn.
But I love you in the
doghouse. But in my heart, I love you very much. See if that works out so well. Right, so, of course, all these things, hard business, is all taken from Paul, that now with the heart, and it's only the heart, and the law is a curse. Where is that? I mean, was Moses a Christian? I say this, if you're a Christian and you're listening to this show, you're struggling with faith, ask yourself the question, did Moses know about Christianity? When I say did he know, did Moses believe in Christianity? Because the New Testament says that all the prophets spoke of me. I'm asking you honestly now, does Moses speaking, do you see anything Christian in these words? Would Paul advocate what you're reading over here? Of course not. Paul says, no, the laws have made a curse for us. Let us continue.
I have to read through 12 and 13 because they're awesome. And now, O Israel, what does the Lord your God demand of you? Only to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to worship the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, to keep the commandments of the Lord and his statutes, which I command you this day, for your good. For
your benefit. That is, that someone say, well, the gods need, like God, it needs it. Like God, if we don't keep commandments, like God is having a lousy day. He needs you to tell him nice things about him. If you don't tell God how great you are 50 times a day, God has such a big fragile ego, he'll fall apart. No, that last modifier is what separates Judaism from all the pagan religions in the world. The pagan religions in Bali and Hindu, they give gods sacrifice that the gods actually need, and in turn the gods give us. But God saying, I don't need any of this. It's l'toiv lecha. It's for you. It's for your good. I'm not becoming a richer God, or the whole world belongs to me. It's all for you. I don't need all this, all these platitudes and so on. It's for you to raise you up, not for me. I don't need that. So that end modifier is critical.
Behold, to the Lord your God belong the heavens and the heavens of the heavens, the earth and all that is in it. Only your forefathers the Lord desired to tell them, and he chose their seed after you out of all the peoples, as it is this day. You shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart, therefore, and be no more stiff-necked.
Right. And again, it means your mind. That means don't go walk around saying, there are people, I'm not going to, look, those of you who are considering being an observant Jew, I'm not going to lie to you. There are some people walk around who would not eat, who wouldn't even walk into a non-kosher restaurant, wouldn't do it. But they're not thinking about God. It's a practice. It just rote. God doesn't need that either. And we see that message in the beginning of Isaiah chapter 1. If you think you're going to just keep all these things, but you don't think about God, God's on your heart, you don't care for the widow and orphan, I don't need that either. Anyways, let's continue.
For the Lord your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords, and great, mighty, and awesome God, who will show no favor, nor will he take a bribe. Now that for me was a very important passage when I was coming out of the church, nor will he take a bribe, because it totally negated for me if you believe, then God will forgive and forget your sins, because it felt a little bit like I had God in an arm lock, right? I've believed in this guy now, so you have to forget. That's like bullying. That's a form of a bribe, and this verse completely negates that for me.
Right, of course. This is the repetition of what's saying for, because God has everything, and He doesn't need it. This goes back to the point that I said earlier, that this is all for your good. There's nothing we have that we can give God that makes God more complete, and therefore you are literally incapable of bribing me. There is nothing you have that I don't have. Now, if there's nothing we have that God does not have, then therefore everything God is asking us to do is for our good, not that God will have more money in His pockets and have tithings and you'll give Him back. I don't need anything. This is all for you, not for me. Anyways, let's continue. As opposed to a judge who does take a bribe, why do judges take bribes and alter their judgments? Because you stuck money in the pocket that they don't have, and therefore, they're willing to adjust their adjudication because you enrich their pockets.
He executes the judgment of the orphan and the widow, and he loves the stranger, which I'm very happy about, because I am the stranger in this passage. To give him bread and clothing. You shall love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall fear the Lord your God, worship him, and cleave to him, and swear by his name. I love that phrase, cleave to him. That's what it's the true essence of a marriage, I think, is when a male cleaves to a female and a female cleaves to a male. And that's what it feels like when you have that kind of relationship with God.
Yeah. That's a great translation. Uvoi tidbak, that means you should cleave to him. That's a great translation. Go ahead.
He is your praise and he is your God. Who did these great and awesome things for you, which you have seen, which your own eyes have seen?
That's right. It's not you took someone's word for it. The Lord spoke to me and I have a message to you. You saw it with yourself, your own eyes. You actually, remember we go back to Exodus, you actually saw the voice of God. You were there. You saw the smoke. I'm not telling you take my word for it. The Lord told me. There's someone who met the Virgin Mary in Honolulu. No. You were there.
With 70 souls, your forefathers descended to Egypt. Oh,
this is a big verse. I'm sorry.
Let me finish the verse. And now the Lord your God.
I'm literally, I have to if you hear me
get a towel. Get a towel.
I should be wearing a bib when I do this show. Go ahead.
With 70
you know what they have
souls.
at the dentist? They put that thing in your mouth that sucks out the, I should have that in my mouth during this. These are such delicious words that it has a Pavlov effect on me.
So here we are, verse 22. With 70 souls, your forefathers descended to Egypt, and now the Lord your God has made you as the stars of heaven in abundance.
Right. And why is this verse very interesting? Of course, this is the verse that the Christian translators of the Septuagint forgot to change. Because as you know, in Acts 7:16, Stephen says that it was 75 souls went down. It's just because he was the book of Acts, whoever wrote it, let's say you say Luke, didn't know. Now what happened, just so you know, is that we find it in Genesis and Exodus, and here in Deuteronomy 10:22, this passage are the three passages that tell us it was 70 souls that went down to Egypt. What the church did was whoever altered the Septuagint to conform to Acts 7:16 forgot to change this. So therefore, in every Christian English translation, they follow the Hebrew. But if you have access to a Septuagint, you'll notice that they forgot to use bleach to wipe off this fingerprint. And this in the Septuagint reads 70 souls also, which contradicts, of course, Acts 7:16. Let's continue.
Therefore, you shall love the Lord your God, keep his charge, his statutes, his ordinances, and his commandments all these days. And you shall know this day that I speak not with your children, who did not know and who did not see the chastisement of the Lord your God, his greatness, his mighty hand, and his outstretched arm, his signs and his deeds, which he performed in the midst of in the midst of Egypt, to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and his entire land. That's a really long sentence. Good grief. All those commas. Someone give me a full stop.
I just want to just go to verse 7. So sweet.
Please
Forgive
do.
me for doing this, because what I want to do is just say, this is to every atheist agnostic in the world, this is the time for you to repent. The text, look at verse 7, because verse 7 completes it all. Let's read verse 7. Ki einechem arois es kol maaseh Hashem hagol asher aso. You know what this text is saying? This text is saying, is talking to Sam Harris. The text is saying, I didn't make the. It's talking to the audience, to the reader, saying, and the reader is the one who witnesses. You saw it. I didn't. Don't let anyone say, "Oh, it was your father, your forefathers." You saw it with your eyes. You heard it with your ears. You were the ones who bore witness to this, not someone before them. And the question is, if the Torah was invented by someone years later, as is taught by Richard Dawkins and so on, who read this for the first time? Whoever read this for the first time is going, wait, my grandfather doesn't know anything about this. My father never heard about this. How come no one ever told me? This takes atheism and agnosticism, and it takes it and it burns it down to the ground. This is unbelievable things. I wish we had more time for it. U'shmartem es kol hamitzvos asher anochi mitzavcha hayom, and you should guard all the commandments that Hashem is giving you this day. L'man techzu ku uvosem yirishtem asara. Therefore, you'll grab the land that God has given you, Hashem, that you are going to pass over there today. And then I'm just going to go to the last part of this passage, which a Jew says twice a day. This is the middle paragraph of the Shema, and I'm skipping, with your permission, just skipping to verse 13.
Yeah, sure, please do.
Okay, and here you have the summation, because it really is, don't only look at this as like, if you do this, then I will reward you, but if you do bad, you do. I want you to see this as a watch out. That means that's the key I want you to take. Because obviously, if you've been listening to the show for a long time, you're familiar with these concepts. The one thing that you'll miss that is here in Eikev is it is in fact the abundance and the wealth and all the blessing that you receive that will cause you to sin. And watch the language over here. V'hoya, verse 13. V'hoya im shemoya tishmu el mitzvosai asher anochi mitzav escham hayom. It'll be that if you will in fact listen. Shemoya means listen, not just hear, and guard the commandments I give you this day. Lahava, to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul. Then what's going to happen? V'nosati matar artzchem, and the word is beito, in its time. What the key of it's this is a special kind of rain. It's the rain when you need it, not when you don't need it. It's the rain. Then you're going to harvest it. Your animals will have all the delicious v'chalta v'savata. Here we go, that exact word. You're going to be. This is why we bless after we eat. This is the key, because you're going to be eat and your belly's going to be full. And then the Torah says this: Hishamru lachem. Be careful. This is going to be your stumbling block. Oh, we have everything. Oh, we're okay. Our bellies are full. Watch out. Maybe your hearts will turn away. Besartem, and it'll turn. Vavadatem Elohim achem. You'll worship other gods. Bishtachavisem lam. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen if that God's but you'll do that. V'chora af Hashem b'chem, and God is going to be very angry at you. V'otzaras hashemayim, the heavens will be closed up. And the land will not give off its fruit. Which is an allusion to, you remember what I told you earlier is going to happen to all the nations that are sinning in the land, that you're going to overtake them, you're going to get thrown out. So my friends, it's not like God saying, oh, all good things are going to happen to the Jews, not to the Goyim. No, if you misbehave in the land will spit you out. And therefore, place these words on your mind and your heart. And therefore, how do we symbolize them? And you should bind them as a sign on your arm. And notice here, some people say, oh, it's in my heart. No, we actually have phylacteries that are bound. The Russell would say it should be just a sign on your heart. Where does your hand come into your heart? And should be for a sign between your eyes. And these are the phylacteries. The word phylactery, by the way, the first time we actually see it in Jewish, in literature, is actually in the Christian Bible. That's the first time phylactery ever appears. And as it turns out, all those say, well, the Jews made it up. There is no such thing as phylacteries. It just means it should be in your heart and your mind. What are you doing binding it on your hand? But as it turns out, in Cave 4, they found 24 phylacteries that date back to the 2nd and 3rd century BCE, and they're exactly the same as the ones we have today. And there's a picture of it in volume 1 of my book, Let's Get Biblical. And that, of course, is an unfortunate way that I have to promote my book. You should teach her till the when you're sitting in your house, and when you're going on the way, when you're lying down, when you rise up, on all the time. And you should inscribe them on the mezuzah that's on the doorpost of your home. Lama'an, so that Yirbu Yimechem Uvnei V'nechem Al Ho'adamo Asher Nishma Hashem Lavoisechem Laseislam Kimei Hashemayim La'aretz, in order so that your days will be numbered greatly, and your children on the land that God has sworn to your forefathers, Kimei Hashemayim Al Ha'aretz, like the days of the heavens over the earth.
I just want to, just quickly, I'm going to read through 1921 super fast. And you shall teach them to your sons to speak with them, and you shall sit in your house, and when you walk in the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise, and you shall inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates, in order that your days may increase. Now, I like to look at that as in quality as well as quantity. And the days of your children and the land which the Lord swore to your forefathers to give to them, and the days of the heaven above the earth. And we are now in the home straight.
Yes.
For if you keep these commandments, which I command you to do them, to love the Lord your God. This is the 4th time he said this in this parasha. To walk in all his ways and to cleave to them, then the Lord will drive out the nations from before you, and you will possess nations greater and stronger than you. Every place upon which the soles of your feet will tread will be yours, from the desert to the Lebanon, from the river to the Euphrates, and into the western sea will be your boundary. No man will stand up before you. The Lord your God will cast the fear of you and the dread of you on all the land upon which you tread, as he spoke to you. And that's the end in verse 25.
Yeah. And this is what happened. I'll just tell you one quick anecdote that will take 60 seconds. And that is, in fact, that when the chief rabbi of the Israeli Defense Forces, Shlomo Goren, in the 67 war, as soon as Jerusalem was liberated, he heard over his microphone that he apprehended that Hebron, which is south of Jerusalem, and Judea had been liberated as well. So he ran down right away with a Torah and a chauffeur and a driver and a jeep. That's all he wanted. The chief rabbi wanted a jeep, a chauffeur, and Torah to go because Hebron, the second holy city, is liberated. As it turns out, it was a miscommunication. Listen to this. It was a miscommunication. As it turns out, the IDF never conquered Hebron yet. Didn't conquer Hebron yet. So what happened? So what happened was the chief rabbi shows up, a man with a beard, a holy man shows up with his driver. And all this, out of every window in the Hebron, they hung out white sheets, and the mufti and the heads of all the family clans of Hebron walked out and handed him the keys to the city and surrendered to the chief rabbi. This is history. The Hebron surrendered to the chief rabbi of the Israeli Defense Forces, who at the time was the chief rabbi of the Israeli Defense Forces, and eventually became the chief rabbi of Israel. This is history, my friends. Look it up. Literally, the city of Hebron surrendered surrendered in 67 to the chief rabbi because he thought the IDF was there. As it turns out, the IDF didn't even make it, and he went to Hebron. But the enemies in Hebron already heard that the Klal Yisrael, the people of Israel, are coming through, and they surrendered to the rabbi. I'm not kidding. Look it up for yourself.
That is
that's history.
What an awesome story.
This is history. But what happened? I'm going to tell you quickly, another 60 seconds. There were big parades. I remember as a little boy, big parades. Big parades with Moshe Dayan. Look how powerful and strong we are. And that was already, God said, oh, he didn't recognize me. They were going, look how wise Moshe Dayan was, and our Air Force wiping him out. And instead of praising Hashem properly, many unfortunately attributed the success to how wise Dayan was, how wise our commanders were, how brave our pilots was, instead of giving the proper saying that this is from Hashem. And unfortunately, then the next war didn't come on any day, my friends, but it came on Yom Kippur. Hashem had a message in that one. They came after, and that was a very, very bloody war. We won it, but ultimately it wasn't an accident that it happened on Yom Kippur. Anyways, my friends, it was a great show. It was great having me on. Jason, it was terrific. And
well, it's a great privilege and honor to do this on our own. I hope Jono is fit for purpose next week. Thoughts are going out to Jono. He's got lots of changes in his and it's for him and his family coming up in the next few months. Lots of exciting stuff, and we look forward to having him back next week. Thanks, you guys, for joining us on this. And if you've got thoughts and comments on the program, please use the comment space underneath this program to let us know. If you've got questions, you can fire them at us as well. Thank you, Rabbi Singer, for giving us your time every week so graciously and your insights.
Always.
And we'll see you guys very soon. Bye-bye.
Shalom.